Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another educational episode of the Comic Book University. I'm your host, Professor Bill. Let's get started. Guys, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on the 20th of September is about to introduce Robert Reyes, one of the Ghost Riders, one of the many, exhaustingly many Ghost Riders. Now, I could just do Robert Reyes, or you can wait until the day that I release it, or sometime in the future, just skip right to that video. But what I plan on doing is, similar to my Hulk video, I plan on stretching this out to smaller bites of action-packed, dramatical, and most important, educationally, this is a university after all, information about all of the Ghost Riders. Hopefully I won't miss any. There really are a lot. But in order to actually get started, we have to go before the Marvel Comics to a company called Magazine Enterprises, who actually created the Ghost Rider character. But even then, we have to go just a little bit farther back than that. You see, it started off in Magazine Enterprises as a character called Calico Kid. And this character appeared in issue number 6 of Tim Holt Comics. Who's Tim Holt? Oh, this is going to be so exhausting, isn't it? That's all right. Stick through it with me. Guys, Tim Holt was, at the time, from the year, 1927 on, he was the #1 cowboy western hero in TV. He starred in a lot of movies. He actually worked for RKO Pictures. This production company had a Western character called Tim Holt. He was a great face for TV, and he did Westerns at the time. He starred in pictures with Humphrey Bogart, and Bogart didn't do Westerns, he did other movies, so please understand when I say that he was #1 in his particular genre, which was Westerns. Now, Tim Holt was a franchise, and they pretty soon decided to make a comic about Tim Holt. Now, I know what maybe some of you guys are thinking, especially the younger audiences. Honestly, even people my age, why? Why Westerns? They're not fun. They're not exciting. Nobody makes Westerns today. You're right. And you're wrong. There are Westerns. They just did a remake of Magnificent Seven that's supposed to come out with Chris Pratt pretty soon, a.k.a. Star-Lord, right? And they've done several Westerns. Django, which comes from the comic books also. There's Quentin Tarantino, just did one recently. At the end of the day, Westerns still do, once in a while, excite us. Who can't watch Tombstone, starring Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer, the Iceman, a.k.a. Tom Cruise's Top Gun fame? Incredible display. One of my favorite Westerns of all time was Silverado. Westerns are a part of our culture. And back in the day, before a Superman could even be conceived, before a Superman could take off and become as famous as he was while he was being made, it was hard for people to understand or to imagine past a certain point. There was a time when nobody ever really thought about going to space. It was a total pipe dream. We're here. Oh, we can get a magnifying glass and put it with another and look in this lens and see through this tube space. That's as close as we're getting. It was always hard. And just like technology has to develop, so too does imagination. Really weird concept to consider, right? But it's true. It's true. So, point, when America was expanding and moving westbound with Manifest Destiny, it was the big thing on people's minds. What is out there? What's out there? What can we find? And that's what we really wanted to know. So we look at this. We look at the West and we say, this is where we want to go. This is where we're going. let's find out some more about this. And that's what we did. And we explored this in movies, in radio before that, and in comics. Not just comic strips, but the comic books. And Westerns for a good long time were the major form of entertainment in comic books. So we have Tim Holt playing Tim Holt in the comic books. And he wasn't a superhero. He wasn't even a hero. In fact, it took some time for him to finally put a mask on, a bandana on, and have a secret identity, because even that didn't really take at the time. But in issue number 6, we had the Calico Kid. Calico Kid was no one. It's just he wasn't really that impressive. He's just a guy that, it was like a filler, where the kids would look and make no mistake. Comics were designed for children. So just like you'd see a kid's show today, and most adults or even teenagers can't get into these kiddie shows, the kids themselves were enraptured by this, and that's what the comics were made for. But the Calico Kid was basically just a peddler, and reading those comics, I don't remember him even having a name. So it's just this guy called the Peddler, who would be in all black. He'd have a horse and a carriage, the old covered wagons, and he'd be riding along, and he would solve all sorts of different problems, but as his alternate identity, the Calico Kid. As the peddler, who apparently had no name, he was just some wimpy guy, traveling. And that was kind of his way of being able to appear in different areas, because you can't have all the crime in just one place. So the very first appearance in issue 6 had him trying to clear the name of this Chinese kid who owned a laundromat named Sing Song. His name was Sing Song. So the very first appearance of the Calico Kid in issue number 6 of Tim Holt was the kid, the peddler, coming by and seeing this kid about to be hanged, and he changes into bright clothes, gets on the back of his horse, Ebony was the horse's name, and ride off and rescue Sing Song. Basically, the people of the town are accusing him of committing a crime. Apparently he stabbed the marshal of the town in the back. And the dying words of the marshal were, "Get Sing Song." So they came after him, and they were going to lynch him, this lynch mob. Calico Kid rescued him, brought him out, said he needs a fair trial, goes and does some talking, a little bit of investigating. All this mind you in about 8 pages, because there were several stories inside these comics. I'd explained it before. There's not just one continuous story that can be taken up again or continued in the next comic. Every single issue, for the most part, was a standalone issue. And more than that, every single story inside those issues was not in any real continuity. Not really. Only in the most base form. They were all standalone, because again, these were for kids, short attention span. So here you have Sing Song, who it turns out he didn't murder the sheriff. In fact, the sheriff didn't even die. Sing Song didn't kill the sheriff. Some guy named Sansone did. And Sansone was actually a guy who the marshal got the mail, and he opened it up, and there's a Dodger inside. A Dodger is a wanted piece of paper. It says wanted dead or alive, wanted $200, $500, whatever, those kinds of, those were called Dodgers. So he found this paper that said, hey, this guy Sansone, he's if I remember correctly, he was a deserter. He was an army deserter and possibly a spy for the other side, not too long after the Civil War. And obviously, big deal, treason. So actually, treason really is kind of a big deal. But the point is that he realized that the sheriff or the marshal discovered this, and he killed him. So the sheriff, in mumbling, said, get Sansone, but they heard get Sing Song. So they actually got the wrong guy. And Calico Kid found the right guy, brought him to justice, and the townspeople learned an important lesson. And that's mostly how these stories went. What does this have to do with Ghost Rider? Allow me, please. By issue 11 of Tim Holt, they decided that this Calico Kid thing just wasn't really going anywhere. And that's probably a good thing, because it turns out that, issue number 6 was May of 1944. That was of the Tim Holt comic. Well, the month before that, Timely Comics, which is the eventual predecessor to Marvel Comics, had a character, Tex Morgan. Now, in this issue of Tex Morgan, issue number 5, Marshall, Tex Morgan, came across a bad guy in one of the small parts of this comic, one of the standalone stories. Mind you, this was Timely. And there was a bad guy named the Calico Kid. And he was only used one time. He was killed in that issue. Whatever. It was a throwaway character. So when the following month, the Calico Kid name shows up over here, it wasn't a whole lawsuit thing. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with something like that? It's a silly little thing. In fact, maybe it even slipped under the radar. Who knows? But the idea is that by issue 11, they'd realized that this character just wasn't going anywhere. So in issue 11, that was in November of the same year, 1949, we're going back to Magazine Enterprises, Tim Holt issue 11 made this, what we can imagine is the same character, into the Ghost Rider. Now they give the Calico Kid's character a name and make him a U.S. Marshal. And this U.S. Marshal's name now, they actually gave him a name, was Rex Fury. Tex Morgan, Rex Fury. Both U.S. Marshals. Timely's came first. So they just suddenly gave him the name Rex Fury, and he's chasing after this bad guy. Guy goes by the name of Bart Lasher. Now, Bart is disguised as a Native American and has real Native Americans working for him. And they basically kind of almost kill Rex Fury. They throw him into this big cavernous ravine valley called the Devil's Sink. And nothing that goes in ever comes out. So they just assume that he must be dead. So they throw him in there, and essentially there's like an underground cavern down there, and he finds all these supplies, and he's able to survive, and he's able to find his way out. It was lit too, which was very strange. But, it's comics. It's just about get the story out. Again, all of these were about 8 pages each, so there's only but so much that they could really put in there, and they're for kids, and just explain it away, let it go. So he's able to eventually get out, and he decides to don this outfit of all white, white hat, white clothes, didn't even wear a mask. Go figure. And he gets a white horse, and the horse's name is Spectre, and he goes after Bart and the Native Americans. Is like 2 weeks later, and chases them off. The natives are spooked beyond belief, and because they're superstitious, and natives must be dumb. By the way, I'm part native, and yes, I do take offense to that. Kind of. Water off a duck's back. So Bart starts running away, riding away. The Ghost Rider is chasing him, and Bart falls off and lands on a conveniently placed wheel spoke that's sticking out from the wreckage of when he attacked and ambushed Rex Fury before. And so just deserts, right? They show him falling towards this spike, and then they just, give the impression that, oh yeah, he was impaled and he died. So that's what happened. And that was the beginning of Rex Fury's Ghost Rider. By the next issue, that's issue 12, he had a mask on that didn't cover his ears or the back of his head, just the front. But, at night, it looked like he was glowing. Now, he was in these comics by Magazine Enterprise. He was in the Tim Holt comics. He also moved over to the Red Mask comics and A1 comics. Had his own little inside stints there. It turns out this actually wound up becoming the most famous or popular character of Magazine Enterprise's existence. Much later, it was bought by Howard Hughes, believe it or not. Anyway, much later, they would reprint these issues in a different comic book company when the license completely expired from here. That original Ghost Rider character is actually, to this day, open license. Anyone can draw pictures of that original Ghost Rider and not have a problem. The only trick of that is you can't use the name Ghost Rider, because that was picked up by Marvel. That was copyright. That copyright was taken and owned now by Marvel Comics. So that's a brief history of the original Ghost Rider. Point of contention. They actually call in the new run, the reprint of all the exact same stories in his own comic, they actually called that Ghost Rider. They had to change his name, so they changed it to the Headless Horseman. Now, when I say that it actually goes farther back than that, I mean on an almost parallel. Because the exact same year that it initiated, this comic, 1948, there was a guy named Stan Jones. And he produced this song called Riders in the Sky. By the following year, there were more than 50 different versions of the exact same song. Different people, different artists singing that song. Many of them changed the name a little bit to Ghost Riders, Riders in the Sky, A Cowboy Tale. So many different versions, and there were a lot of really good versions. The original kind of has to get that one up on them, though, right? But you might find a different version that you like. And if you go to YouTube, you should be on YouTube now, right? But if you do search around YouTube for Ghost Riders in the Sky, you'll find many different versions. Again, Stan Jones is the original. Check out that one first. Basically just a story about, what have you, a guy who sees a vision in the sky of cowboys chasing after a herd of cows, right? Some steers. And that if they're not careful, this is going to be their life, even in the afterlife. And they have big red eyes, and it's horrible and scary and demonic. Basically goes back to Irish folklore, the Great Hunt. So just that song alone was what actually inspired this character, Ghost Rider. And the creators of the comic book itself, that was Dick Ayers, who's extremely popular. He moved on. He went to work with Marvel eventually, and that's one of the reasons why Ghost Rider came over to Marvel. But him and Ray Krank, they got that idea from this song. And Ghost Rider kind of went on to different stories within Magazine Enterprises, and eventually he would fight phonies, people who, almost like a Scooby-Doo mystery kind of thing, where there's a fake Frankenstein's monster and all sorts of silly little things like that. And eventually he did actually start fighting werewolves and vampires, real werewolves, vampires, comic books. But he himself was not actually superpowered. He had no powers, no abilities, nothing except excellent horseman skills. He was able to punch people from a horse who were either on the ground or on a horse. He had incredible marksmanship. He would wear his cloak at the time. They never really went into a lot of explanation. Eventually they stated that it was phosphorescent. You know, they put some kind of phosphorus on himself, his guns, his clothes, his horse, Spectre, all sorts of things like that. But for the most part, didn't really go into too much detail with it, and it was very vague. Now, it's known that the 6-shooters back in the day, those revolvers, they didn't shoot very straight, right? It's why the legends of like Wild Bill Hickok and his incredible marksmanship with the Colt Peacemaker and things like that, they go down in history. And there are very few people like that. When you think about it, how many can you actually name? Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Jesse James? Not too many, right? And the reason for that is because not too many people could actually master this beast, this iron. So they kind of went on that idea. I mean, when you think about it, here's this guy dressed in all white who doesn't have any body armor on. He's wearing all white. He's a normal human, and he's wearing all white. All it takes is one time for him to get shot, and the legend of the Ghost Rider goes straight down the sinkhole, because you're going to see blood all over the place. But even when he was fairly close to people, he would never actually get shot, because people would miss, and people would be afraid. They see the ghost, you know, especially when he came out at night. He would sometimes take his clothes, his cloak, and it was reversible. He would, fold it in a way so that there was only black showing. So at night, he could hold it so that it looked like he only had floating hands and a head, you know, either standing or riding on his horse, whatever. And sometimes he would even wrap it around his head so that it just looked like he was a headless horseman riding or galloping or running after them or shooting at them, whatever, you know? So he had great aim. Everybody else was scared, terrified, and shaking, trying to aim at him. And I swore the bullet went right through him. And he would pick up on legends like that. It did so well that, again, Tim Holt eventually in the comics, started wearing a red mask. And that's where the character Red Mask came from. But at the end of the day, it was not superpowered at all. It's just a regular guy, and that's what he did. And then the Comics Code Authority happened. Anybody who knows the book Seduction of the Innocent and all the nonsense that came with that, they came along and they said that anything having to do with ghosts, real or not, amongst many other things, like vampires and werewolves, it was just like vampires, werewolves, okay, he doesn't do regular bad guys anymore. He just fights Western crimes. It's not a big deal. But they said anything even depicting the idea of a ghost was not allowed anymore in the comics. So the Ghost Rider comic had to end. There was really nothing they could do with it. So, yeah, thank them. Anyways, guys, this is episode 1, the original Ghost Rider, pre-timely, pre-Marvel Comics. The creators, original, and the inspiration behind. Go check out the song. Guys, class dismissed.